In this episode, Golden and I discuss The Mandalorian Season 2, Full Speed Ahead.
The Omega Beam. Full power.
Welcome to the Omega Beam number 107. I'm your host, Oren Merton. So if you love sci-fi, Star Wars, and you don't live under a rock, you know that Disney Plus has started airing one of the most exciting additions to the Star Wars universe, the live-action series The Mandalorian. So the second season finale just aired this Friday, and now all 8 episodes of Season 2 are streaming on Disney Plus in the USA, elsewhere in the rest of the world. That means it's time for us to talk about it. Now, there's so much going on that is so exciting in Season 2. It is impossible to have a full discussion of this series without spoilers. So for those of you who try and avoid spoilers like I do, here's what we're doing. The first part of this episode is completely spoiler-free. I mean, no more than you can get just from watching the trailer. So we're going to let you know when that section is over. So if you care about spoilers, you can pause the episode and come back after you've caught up with the season. And then we can talk about the whole thing, spoilers and all, at that point. Okay, let's get going. I am here with Golden to talk about Season 2 of The Mandalorian, which I would argue is the best Star Wars has to offer right now.
Not to be fair, they only start one show and kind of like Star Trek is doing, where they start one and then when that one ends, they start another one.
That's an interesting point, and we'll talk about that in the spoiler section. But I was going to say that I'm assuming the vast majority of people who are listening to this either already streamed the whole series now that every episode is available, or don't care about spoilers. But for those who do, they
might care about spoilers, but have tried to abandon the care about spoilers, right? Because the fact that all you have to do is use any social media and spoilers abound.
Exactly. It's one of those things where this show is so popular in the genre that when it drops at like 12:01 a.m. on Friday morning, people have already watched it multiple times, and if you log on to social media that morning, there's going to be articles, there's going to be spoilers, all kinds of things. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out without spoilers, and we're going to give you like a warning and some time to pause the episode until you catch up to get to the rest of it. So we'll start spoiler-free. Golden, what'd you think?
Excellent. I mean, Season 1 was excellent.
Yeah. Season
2 just kind of picks up where Season 1 left off and just keeps steamrolling through. Yeah. It is the traditional serial, as serials were before.
Yeah.
And I think there isn't anything I can really poke fun at. When we get to the spoiler section, I'll bring up some things that people had issues with. But otherwise, it's just, you don't have to be a Star Wars fan.
Exactly. I was watching one of the behind-the-scenes things with showrunner and creator Jon Favreau, and he said that ultimately he wanted to make a lone wolf and cub samurai western. And that is exactly what this is. And that is the heart of it. That if you don't know Star Wars lore, yeah, you're not going to get some of it, and it's much richer if you are a Star Wars fan. But if you're not, it's still just a great samurai western.
And chances are you might be watching it with someone who is a Star Wars fan who can say, "Oh, well, that's why that's so cool."
Right, exactly. So the story from Season 1 was that a bounty hunter, Din Djarin, had found a child called the Child.
Yes.
Yeah. And he was tasked with finding its kind and returning it at the end of Season 1. And this is ultimately a story about an adopted father trying to do right by his child. And when you take away...
A child that he never asked for.
Yeah.
A child that he didn't know he was going to care about. Something that he just thought was another bounty.
Yeah. And if you pull away all of the Star Wars lore and world, ultimately you have an emotional story about a man trying to do right by his son. And even in a series in which the character spends the whole time, give or take, in a helmet, so you're not watching his physical face, his tone, his body language is very emotive.
And then even with his body language, there are times where it's not actually
right
in the suit, because he can't do all of the stunts that Mando does.
Right. He was explaining there's actually a trio of people. That there's one who's a martial arts expert and one who's a weapons expert. It's wonderfully put together. The visuals are amazing. The music is amazing. But ultimately...
Yeah, the behind the scenes for season 1 where they talk about the music and how he created the music, Ludwig Göransson, is really... It's neat to watch and to listen to this young man who was so inspired by John Williams. It was like, oh my gosh, I can never be John Williams. But you can be, for someone else out there, what John Williams was to you.
Right.
And it always makes me kind of cringe a little bit when I hear an artist say, well, I can't do as well as that other person. Well, you can't do as well as that other person because you are not that other person.
Right.
But you are yourself. And it's what you can do.
Yeah, Neil Gaiman said at a lecture that, don't try and write a Neil Gaiman story. Try and write the best you story that you can.
I think that's something I need to remember too.
Yeah, we all do. And I think that the Ludwig Göransson does a fantastic job at that. And like I said, all of the elements that make The Mandalorian Season 2 are excellent in and of themselves, but without an emotionally gripping story. You can have all the Star Wars Easter eggs that longtime fans are going to get excited about as you want, but if they're not tied together with a story, it's only ever going to be able to be so good.
I mean, you have one of the episodes where they bring back the character Mayfeld?
From Season 1,
Mayfeld
yes.
or Mayfield?
I think
Mayfeld?
it's Mayfeld.
Okay, Mayfeld. And the relationship between him and Mando during that episode, and watching that evolve and watching to see what's going to happen, is just humanity.
Yeah, and that's a great point. They don't just bring back characters from Season 1 or Easter eggs from Star Wars just for its own sake. They bring them in, but then enrich them. They go into some evolution of how the characters interact with each other, interact with the world around them, and it really makes for good storytelling, and it does enhance the Star Wars world. It makes it feel deeper, more lived in, more real, in a sense.
And you're getting to go places and see more about those places than you can with a movie.
Right.
With a movie, it's kind of, you only have about 2 hours, you glance through it, and it's done.
Right.
And now they can kind of even go a little bit more in depth to some of these places, some of the type of people, and each episode isn't very long, maybe 35, 45 minutes. It's only, again, like Season 1, as long as it needs to be.
Right. Yeah, that is something that I think you'd think that from the beginning of streaming, directors and creators would have realized that even though we're used to on network television because of commercials and because of needing to switch to fit in other shows in a schedule, things had to be half an hour long, plus or minus and shorter if there's advertising, an hour long, etc. But streaming, who cares? If your show is 36 minutes, if your show is 45 minutes, who cares? And in Season 2, that is used brilliantly. You've got I think the opening episode was 50 minutes or so. And I think the finale is also a little on the longer side. But then you have others that are 31 minutes or whatever. And it's because they're telling a story. And the story dictates the length, not mandate from the studio that we need to fit in X number of shows in our schedule so that we can
it's this
get
hour time
advertising
slot.
in. Yeah. So that's another thing that I think makes The Mandalorian great, that if it's going to take a little longer to tell the story, the show gets a little bit longer. They don't stop it 3/4 in or compress the story artificially just to fit an arbitrary
That
time
and you
slot.
have different directors directing different episodes.
Right.
However, those directors are talking to the other directors
Right. It's
to
like
keep the
directing
continuity,
school.
and it's like a directing community.
Yeah. It's really interesting how they put this together because, again, in normal network shows, they hire a director for every different episode, or maybe one director will do a few. Very rarely does a director do a whole series in television, but they're all kind of their own island. Whereas in this one, watching the Disney Plus behind the scenes stuff, Jon Favreau wanted to bring a collective of directors together. And even though they're responsible for an episode, they're each part of the whole.
Everyone's listening to everyone. Everyone's
Yeah.
open to feedback and conversation so that no one is alone.
Right. There are a couple sort of quote unquote big time movie directors that jump into this one. Robert Rodriguez directs one of them. He did Alita Battle Angel and other things filmically. And the director of Ant-Man, Peyton Reed, who directed one in first season, and he also directs, I believe, the finale of
Taika
season
Waititi.
2. Taika Waititi, who's part of the collective, though.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of, and even Carl Weathers directed one.
Yeah,
episode.
Carl Weathers directs one this time. So they have the collective isn't a full 8 directors for all 8 episodes. So they do bring in other directors, but they're directors that sort of fit in their universe, either because they do other Disney
that
or Marvel
director
things.
kind of fits that episode.
Yeah. I think as far as this spoiler-free part of our discussion goes, if you haven't watched it, watch it. You will love it. I mean, if you even like Golden said, even if you're not a Star Wars fan, if you just like westerns or samurai
One of
movies,
my best friends is not a Star Wars fan, but she is very much enjoying it. They've only made it to, I think, the end of the first season.
yeah,
But there is just the artistry in the quality.
yeah,
The quality of the costumes, the set designs, what they can do with the new technology that they're using for the set. And the storylines are just very strong.
they are. One of the things that one of the collective and another executive producer, Dave Filoni, said is that, like George Lucas's goal in the original Star Wars, he was basically aiming it at kids, but never talking down to them. He was giving them adult entertainment that children could also understand and enjoy. Jon Favreau and his team keep to that goal, even as they're creating something unique. That this is something that ultimately is just a simple emotional story that anyone can understand, whether you're an adult with lots of Star Wars lore behind you, or if you're not, if you're young and this is your introduction to the Star Wars universe.
Which then leads us into the spoilers.
Yeah. So we'll give you guys a little break. If you haven't seen it yet, please do.
Just stop now.
Yeah.
Listen to the rest of this later.
So, spoiler alert.
so one
3, 2, 1. Okay, spoilers now.
Okay, so one of the big things, of course, was the very last episode.
Yes.
So one of the things that I think Disney needs to think about is maybe dropping new episodes of their shows at like 6 or 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Because a lot of people work.
Mm-hmm.
and they're not going to stay up at midnight. And a lot of people need social media or need media to just do some of their job.
Yeah.
And it's kind of unfair to them that people spoil things. I mean, even Mark Hamill, I saw his Twitter comment way before. I just didn't understand what it meant.
He was vague enough.
He was vague enough saying, "Seen anything good on TV lately?"
Yeah.
I think one of my favorite quotes of someone's reaction to the last episode had to be Kevin Smith saying that Jon Favreau has the biggest balls in the business.
Yeah.
Because
he brought in the big guns. You know, one of the things about this series, I was reading a headline which was hilarious, is like Star Trek, or I keep saying Star Trek. It's because we're also watching Discovery, which is amazing. But Star Wars, one of the great things about Mandalorian is he's one of the best Star Wars characters, and he doesn't care about Star Wars. And it's so true in that the movies were all this epic tale of basically kings and kingdoms. You've got the noble knights.
And Boba Fett was cool, and everyone liked Boba Fett, but you didn't get to know very much about Boba Fett from the movies.
Right.
You didn't get to know very much about Slave One from the movies.
Right.
And in this season, you get to learn more about Boba Fett. Gets to be more badass. You get to see how the actual ship of Slave One actually functions.
Right.
Considering he does start in a prone position when he takes off.
So in this show, Din Djarin, Mando, the Mandalorian, he could care less about republics and empire. He doesn't even know who the Jedi are.
He doesn't really care about Mandalore.
Right, he doesn't. He's a foundling. In other words, even though he's a quote-unquote Mandalorian, he was adopted by the Mandalorians, and when his parents were killed, and so he was raised in that culture.
And he was raised in a more strict of the culture.
Right, in sort of the religious fanatics of that group, which, again, part of his arc is he learns to kind of lighten up. He learns that he can be who he is, that he can maintain himself and his beliefs, and at the same time open himself up.
And a lot of the actors and actresses do care about Star Wars.
Yeah.
They care about it being what they love about Star Wars.
Right.
Katie Sackhoff, when they came, she voices Bo-Katan.
Right.
But now she gets to actually portray Bo-Katan. And she's like, I remember reading something about she wanted the hair right. She wanted the uniform right. She wanted everything to be perfect because she wanted it not only for the fans, but for herself.
Right. And speaking of Easter eggs, you'd already brought up Bo-Katan. They bring in a lot of elements from previous Star Wars. So the Clone Wars and Rebels animated series, which were done by Dave Filoni, who's one of the executive producers on The Mandalorian, they brought in some of his creations, Bo-Katan, a Mandalorian, Ahsoka Tano, who is arguably the best character in Star Wars. I just adore her. She's a Jedi who left the Jedi Order and is a major character in both the Clone Wars and Rebels. He brings them in, and it's both an exciting moment for people who already knew them to see characters that they know and love come to life. And
they're done well.
Right, and are acted incredibly well, written incredibly well. The visuals are fantastic. But they also play an important part in Mando's mission. They have their own things. They're part of that big, glorious epic.
I mean,
he's not.
There is often the Mando shows up, Mando needs something. Oh, well, you need something? Well, I need something. You give me what I want, I'll help you with what you want.
Right.
And there's that give and take.
Right.
And for the first few episodes, it was very strong in that give and take. Mm-hmm. When you get to the last half of the season, some of that give and take kind of slides off, and it doesn't really see it. It's more, there's more substance beyond the just give and take too. Yeah. And
in a sense, it kind of follows season one in the way that in season one, it kind of always building up to a finale in which sort of the band, quote unquote, gets together. The droid from the first one, the characters he'd met along the way, and they all are able to survive, to win. And in this one, again, he meets Bo-Katan, he meets Ahsoka Tano, he brings back characters from the first season.
You have Boba Fett. You have
you bring in Boba Fett, and the bounty hunter who he saved.
And then also we talked about Bill Burr's character.
Right. Miggs Mayfeld. And they all work towards this finale where he can win. One of the things that I said that I loved about The Mandalorian as a whole is it takes characters like you were talking about Boba Fett. You actually get to see how kick-ass he was. Because in the movies, he looked kick-ass, but he really didn't do much other than grab Han Solo and then sort of die like a chump. But now you get to see how badass he really is. And the hero...
And there's also the acceptance.
Yeah.
That he's not really, even though he looks like a Mandalorian, he's got Mandalorian armor, that the other Mandalorians don't see him. They see him as inferior.
Right. And I think one of the things they also did, I think the Mandalorian finale did for Luke Skywalker, and I've said this to you already, the Mandalorian finale did for Luke Skywalker what Rogue One did for Darth Vader. Now, back in the 70s and 80s, they didn't have the kind of kung fu, massive stunt coordination that we do in movies today. And so the sword fights and things that we had in those early movies, we knew Luke Skywalker was powerful and he did cool things, but his reputation was always more powerful than what we saw. Whereas, and the same with Vader. But in Rogue One, in the last few minutes of Rogue One, spoilers for Rogue One as well, he kicks so much ass in that last minute. You're just like, oh my God, that's why he's the most feared guy in the galaxy. And so at the end of the finale in this one, when an unknown Jedi shows up, he basically blows through the entire...
Well, there are what are they called?
Dark Troopers.
Dark Troopers. So the Dark Troopers are really just
They're
hard to kill.
Almost invulnerable.
I mean, you've already seen in the very last episode, you've seen Mando and what Mando has to go through against just one.
Yeah, laser blasts. They're
then you have
really
this
strong.
One Jedi, this X-wing fighter land. This Jedi get out and just starts walking, and anything that's in his path is just slashed here, thrown there, crushed by the Force.
It's the combination of great martial arts moves, great sword fighting, and magic, and his Force powers. And you never got to see a fight like that in the 80s. And so you see it now, and it's not just exciting like, wow, this is, a Jedi from my childhood, and boy, he's kicking ass. But it's also like you see, this is why they are so feared.
Yeah, I mean, you as soon as that, at least for me, as soon as that gloved hand holding the green lightsaber came out, I'm like,
that's got to be him.
That's got to be Luke.
And it was interesting because we were watching a podcast, Fat Man Beyond, with Kevin Smith and Mark Bernardin, and they were speculating on, will a Jedi show up? Because in an episode, I think episode 6, the child reaches out to Jedi. Would a Jedi show up? There's so few left. Who would it be? And my money, the collaborator of Kevin Smith, JC's money, most of the fan base were thinking it's going to be Ezra Bridger. Because Ezra Bridger is a character from Rebels who Dave Filoni created. And it made sense. He's young, so he would have been a young man at this point. And it just seemed like he's the right guy. Somebody suggested, I think it's going to be Luke Skywalker, and we're like, oh, man. But could he really do that?
There were some people even saying, well, maybe Mace Windu isn't actually dead.
Yeah, it could be Mace. But, as cool as it would have been if it were Luke Skywalker, we all kind of said, yeah, but he can't do that. I mean, that's too out there. But he did. And it was
Well, we don't really know what happens between Return of the Jedi necessarily.
Right. I mean, there's no story reason it couldn't have been.
And him deciding that he doesn't want to continue to teach
Right.
or train.
Right. And we have gotten to the point, definitely, where technology is good enough that between digitally putting Mark Hamill's 30-year-old face on a body double and Mark Hamill himself voicing the character, it looked pretty good.
He looked a little more filled out in the face.
It was 5 years later. He ate well.
So, but I know a lot of people were like, that's not him. Oh, come on. I mean, just go with it.
Yeah.
Everything else is incredible.
Right.
This is just excellent instead of incredible.
Right.
Go with it.
And again, getting back to the emotional story, you have this amazing battle.
Well, you kept saying a few episodes back when they first lose the child, you're like, oh, in order to get the child back, he's going to have to take his helmet off and be okay with it. And then you get to the last episode, and it's not to rescue the child. It's because Grogu asked him.
And that's the thing. That battle with Luke and the Dark Troopers is absolutely amazing. And it's so fun to watch, and it's exciting. But again, the emotional beat of the story, and the thing that had me, misty-eyed, was not this great epic battle of, an amazing night.
It was little hand reaching up because I want to touch your face. Will you please take your helmet off?
Yeah. It was the emotional story between Din and Grogu. That is the heart. That's always been the heart of The Mandalorian.
So you have like a couple different things happening in that room with all of the different characters. You have that Bo-Katan, all she wants is to face off against Moff Gideon.
Right.
Because in facing off against Moff Gideon, which we didn't know this, if she succeeds in battle, she has the dark saber, and it's kind of like the wand from Harry Potter. That whoever defeats the prior owner, it belongs to that person.
Right, and we didn't know that. Certainly,
she didn't share it.
Right. Din didn't know that. And so he had to take out Moff Gideon because he was threatening Grogu. And so he comes in with Moff Gideon and with the Darksaber and just hands it to her. And she's staring at him like, oh, man. Because he's more than happy to just turn it right over. He doesn't want it. But then there's that.
But like you said, he doesn't really care about Mandalore. He doesn't care about these other things. Right. And I was reading another article that was talking about how he was able to defeat Moff Gideon. One, the spear, and he is a fighter. Mm-hmm. You don't really know if Moff Gideon has really had that much training as a fighter. He usually, like the article said, other people are doing the fighting for him.
Right.
And then you also have, well, would Moff Gideon actually maybe let Din Djarin beat him so then he could go in there and just buy time because he knows that his warriors are coming back?
I think to some degree it would have all depended on if he thought that Mando would have killed him or not, because he acted surprised when Mando didn't kill him. He may have not been trying to hold back because he may have legitimately thought that Mando was just going to kill him for threatening Grogu, and if he didn't win, he was going to be dead.
Yes, but someone in their party wants him alive for his information.
He didn't necessarily know that.
He didn't know that. But I mean, he could have been playing the long game like, okay, well, I'm going to get my Darksaber back anyway because
right,
my Dark Troopers are going to come. They don't, so what, they've been flushed into space. They can get back here.
Right, they don't need to breathe.
Yeah.
They're droids. I also think it was an interesting counterpoint with how earlier in the season, when Mando first meets Bo-Katan, they're real Mandalorians. In fact, they were even Death Watch, like the watch that found him. And yet they all take their helmet off. And he's really shocked by this. And she says, oh, you can't take your helmet off? Oh, so you're like from the real fanatics. And he's the one who's adhering to this principle that really, it's not actually practical and it shouldn't matter that much. Flip to the conclusion where Mando is just like, look, you want the saber, here it is. Forget the story. You don't have to hold to this religious fanatic story. Just take the saber.
Unless it
But she
really
won't do
does
it.
have power. Like in the Harry Potter movie, the wand wouldn't perform at 100% if it wasn't the correct owner.
You know, there's never been any indication in any of the Star Wars that I know personally of the sabers being sentient. So I think they just work if you got them. But maybe they don't. I don't know.
So, I mean, that was interesting. And, you know, going back to like the helmet thing, you look at the episode with Bill Burr, with his character, Mig Mayfeld. And, you know, here's the opportunity that Mando has to take his helmet off to do this. And now people have seen him. And I was talking earlier about how their characters, you know, have this bond now. Mm-hmm. Well, he kills everyone in the room. Helps Mando kill everyone in the room because now no one has seen his face. And it'll just be no one, too. Because they realize that maybe this guy shouldn't be in jail. Sorry, you died in that explosion.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. He proved himself to be not just useful, but also moral.
Yeah.
And so they rewarded him for that. And I think that's the moral arc of the series. That
Well, you have the first episode. Timothy Oliphant's character has the armor. He proves himself that he's worth it.
Yeah.
But he doesn't get to keep the armor because the armor is like on a whole nother level.
You know, great storytelling all the way through. And I think this is I've really been enjoying following Mando's path and his arc, and of course loved Grogu. And now, like you were saying, there's a whole other story. Is he going to help out with Mandalore? How is that going to work out? You know, Bo-Katan wanted to be the undisputed ruler. Now she needs Mando. I mean, she clearly does not want to fight him. And, you know, now she needs Mando. Is he going to be seen as the leader and end up in charge of Mandalore? We don't know really where season 3 is going because the after credits scene showed Boba Fett and ended going black by saying the Book of Boba Fett coming December 2021, which is the same date as The Mandalorian coming 2021.
And they've got several other series and offshoots that are also in progress.
So it's unsure.
Is it Andor?
Yes.
Andor is one of them.
And Ahsoka is another.
And then there's like a third one. It's like a group of
there's
characters.
Bad Batch. I think they were doing
maybe.
something. Yeah. So the question is, are there going to be 2 series? The Mandalorian that follows Din Djarin on his further adventures? Or is The Mandalorian simply, they keep saying every episode's a chapter. So are we done with this book of the series and now the book of Boba Fett is beginning in The Mandalorian and we're just moving away from Mando and everyone else?
Maybe we come back to him later.
Maybe Mando is a character in Boba Fett's story. I mean, they've clearly interacted.
But I think that they've talked about Mandalore too much.
Right.
To just leave that alone.
To completely ignore it. Yeah. I did hear that as part of that earnings call where Disney laid out their, 50 or whatever things, they did mention, I believe, that all of these series, or maybe not all, but much of the series that seem to be taking place at the same time in the Star Wars universe will be heading towards sort of a grand epic like the Defenders was for the Marvel series, where they had a Daredevil, a Jessica Jones, a Luke Cage, and an Iron Fist, and then it ended in the Defenders where all of them were present. And that this is also going to end in a, maxi limited series.
I don't remember being that excited about the Defenders.
The Defenders was good, but regardless, I'm talking more about the format than I am about the specifics.
Bring back Daredevil. Bring back the Punisher.
Well, it's pretty clear that Daredevil's actually a character in Spider-Man 3 that they're going to be working on. So
like
cool.
Someone said on social media, I think at some point you just have to say who's not in Spider-Man 3.
Who is not appearing in the movie. So, they have a lot of shows, and some of them are definitely taking place at the same time in the Star Wars universe, and it'll be interesting to see where they go. And I do, we started this episode with me saying that I think this is the best Star Wars at the moment. I think in some ways the television Disney Plus Star Wars universe is more vital than the movies. Now, admittedly, they capped off the Skywalker saga, and now we're getting new movies. They announced that Taika Waititi is doing a Star Wars movie. They announced that Patty Jenkins is doing a Star Wars movie. So there may be some amazing Star Wars movies coming in the years to come. But right now,
and Taika Waititi even just start out just letting you know that he's just going to spoil it. He's going to ruin it for everyone. So therefore, you're not going to be disappointed when his movie comes out.
Right. His way of jumping ahead of all the people who are going to accuse him of killing the franchise like they've accused everyone else. I think that for now, at least, and for the foreseeable future in the next couple years, it is the television universe that is really carrying the Star Wars franchise forward in a beautiful and a brilliant way.
And their timing just worked.
Yeah.
Because, no one knew that this past year was going to be more about television than about movies.
Right. And as you mentioned briefly, touched on the technology. One of the things about The Mandalorian is because it is filmed all in front of a gigantic studio.
In the volume.
Yeah, in the volume.
Unreal Engine.
A giant studio filled with LED screens. You can actually make this series with a much more controlled environment and a much more minimal crew.
They talked about the lighting and trying to get the lighting right for Ahsoka. Mm-hmm. They said we want to make sure that she doesn't end up too orange or that they get it just right, which they're able to do because of the environment in which they're filming.
Yeah. And as it happened, certainly this was not designed in any way initially for pandemic situations. It just happened to be one that does lend itself to filming in that kind of distanced way. So it really did. It became a show that could continue, which was fantastic. I'm so glad it did. It's too bad it's a year for the next one.
This gives you time to watch it all over again.
It does. Time for the rewatch.
Well, there is a special on Christmas Day, I think.
Yes.
Which I think is about the filming of the second season.
Yes. For those who didn't know, on Disney Plus, there's a series you can watch called Disney Gallery, 8 episodes, about half an hour long. That is that is the background and making of season 1 of
which
The Mandalorian.
Which I touched on a little bit earlier, talking about the music.
Which you talked about already. And this time for season 2, they made a documentary film, which, as you just said, will be airing on December 25th. And boy, December 25th is sure
you gotta wonder when. When are some of these things dropping?
I
still want to know when Wonder Woman 84 is dropping.
Yeah, I think with Disney, they all drop it at 12:01.
And again, I'm going to go back to saying that I think that they really should just pick a time slot for Friday evening.
Yeah.
Just to reward those people that are working during the day.
Yeah, boy, the 25th is going to be a great day for genre TV. You've got Wonder Woman on HBO Max. You've got the Mandalorian documentary. You have the Pixar movie Soul. There's good stuff. So if you're feeling bad that you're not with family or something that day because of the pandemic and sheltering in place, at the very least, you've got Zoom and you've got some great things to watch.
Yep. Hope that all of you have a happy and safe holiday.
Absolutely.
And a happy and safe New Year's when we get closer to then.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Golden.
You're welcome.
And that's it for this episode. You can find the show notes at theomegabeam.com/107. If you like this episode, please leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Those reviews help people who like this stuff find our podcast. If you have any comments or suggestions, please drop us a line at info@theomegabeam.com. Our next episode is going to be posted after Christmas, so Merry Christmas to all who celebrate. Be good to yourselves and each other, and we'll catch you next time.
The Omega Beam. Full stop.